On Wednesday morning, we set off from our campsite at 10:30 a.m. and crossed into Portugal around lunchtime. Portugal is 1 hour behind Spain, so we gained an hour today. Of course, now we have to say hola for hello and obrigado is thank you, while please remains unchanged from Spanish to Portugal as por favor. Although today was cold, we could immediately see that Portugal is warmer, as most gardens had orange trees in them with oranges on, and we saw red-hot poker flowers and even aloes growing. We reached the city of Braga and went to visit São Martinho de Tobias Monastery, which dates back to the 11th century. But in 1864, it was sold at a public auction and was then privately owned. The Portuguese state acquired it in 1986, empty and in an advanced state of degradation. They have restored and rehabilitated various areas, so safeguarding this piece of national heritage. It was very well laid out, and we were given an English pamphlet as a guide to how life was in the 1700s in the monastery. We saw restored panels of tiling from 1770 depicting life in those days. The interior of the church from 1628 was beautiful, and we saw the upper choir chamber. Apparently, monks sang 8 times a day, starting at 2 a.m. in the morning and ending at dusk. There were 16 guest rooms where people could stay for up to 3 days free in the monastery, and only then were they asked to pay after a lengthier stay. The barber came to the monastery every 12 days. Besides shaving the monks, he also carried out bloodletting, used leeches, and extracted teeth. After our visit, we went to try and buy the Portuguese toll pass, but were not successful. We have tried garages and post offices, which is where we read they could be bought, but no luck so far. We then drove to Bom Jesus do Monte, which is high up on a hillside in Braga, and is one of the most important pilgrimage sites in Portugal. We parked at the top and then walked down the monumental Baroque escadaria, which is a stairway with fountains and statues on each level. At the bottom, you get an amazing view up towards the church and of the whole staircase that you have just walked down. Of course, we then had to climb the long ornamental granite staircase back up, but all the statues of biblical, mythological, and symbolic nature and the fountains made it very therapeutic. At the top, we enjoyed the panoramic view of the surrounding countryside.
Thursday, we left just after 9 a.m. and after not being able to go up a steep cobbled road as it was wet and jacked wheel spun, we got redirected down a very narrow cobbled road. What a nightmare, as we only just fitted. It was really stressful. Anyway, we made it and were at the park and ride next to Venda Nova metro station by 11 a.m. where we left Jack and caught the metro into Porto, €4 each return. Spot on time, the train arrived. Google is a complete godsend, mapping out the whole journey. It took us about 25 minutes with one change of trains to get to São Bento railway station. The English translation of São Bento is Saint Benedict. This building was constructed over a number of years. Starting in 1904, the large tiled murals represent moments in the country's history, and the multicolored panels depict rural scenes showing the people of various regions. The tile project required 11 years to complete. We then walked to the Dom Louis I Bridge, which is a double-decker metal arch bridge that spans the river Duron. As its construction, its 172-meter span was the longest of its type in the world. We also looked at the Porto Cathedral, which is a Roman Catholic church. There is a statue next to the cathedral to honor Vermont Perez, the first Count of Portugal, who ruled from 868 to 887. We walked back towards the train station and stopped for lunch at a cafe, sharing 2 fish cakes and a shrimp risole, with a latte each. The 2 desserts we took back to the motorhome for later as we were too full. The dogs were delighted to see us back, and Beryl managed to go online to the CCT site and get Jack's number plates registered for the tolls in Portugal. So we will now go on toll roads. Still not sure how it works, but apparently we will be notified within 48 hours of any toll fees, and then hopefully we can pay online. But if not, we'll have to look for a CCT office. So we set off for our chosen campsite, only to find that it was not open. This is our 3rd night in Portugal, and we have had a problem each night. Twice the sites were not open, and the last night our first choice was full. It has made our days very long. Anyway, luckily we got to our second choice and were the only people there. Along the way today, we noticed that nearly every home has orange and lemon trees in their yards, and a lot of the homes in the region are tiled on the outside, very ornate.
On Friday, we left at about 9 a.m. and travelled south to Coimbra, which is home to the University de Coimbra, which was founded in 1290 by King Dinas and is said to be one of the oldest universities in continuous operation in the world. We then drove to Tomar, where we saw the aqueduct, which was built from 1593 to 1614. It is 6 kilometers long and has 58 arches. It was built to supply water to the Convent of Christ in Tomar. It is a stunning piece of medieval engineering, and we marveled at it for a little while. The sun was out, and it was the first time we could step outside without jackets on. We proceeded to Fatima, where we parked and took the dogs for a walk to see the sanctuary of Our Lady of Fatima, which is a Catholic pilgrimage site. Fatima village was an unknown place, but on the 13th of May in 1917, 3 shepherd children witnessed the first of successive apparitions of Our Lady of the Rosary. Initially, the church was reluctant to acknowledge this, but in 1930, the Bishop of Leiria recognized the miracle, and from then on, the area developed with amazing speed. A town by 1977 and a city 20 years later. The worldwide fame of Fatima was accentuated during the papacy of John Paul II, who, in 1982, traveled there in gratitude for having survived an attack on his life a year earlier. On the 12th of May each year, there is a candlelit procession when the grandiose square is filled with thousands of pilgrims with candles. When we saw the size of the square, We could only imagine how magical that must look. We then went to the Fatima Wax Museum, where the whole story was told in wax figures. It was incredible to see the life-size wax people. And Dave and I even had a photo next to the present-day Pope Francis. We then drove to a campsite near Nazare, where it was €20 to camp. But we are parked next to a full ablution block with showers. Yay! Our first conventional campsite in 2 weeks.
Saturday. Well, we took advantage of the campsite and had steaming hot long showers last night and again this morning. After a good breakfast of fried eggs and French boerewors, we made a leisurely start at 10:30 a.m., going to Aldi to do our first Portuguese grocery shop. A little into our shopping, the manager came to ask us why we were taking photos of all their products and prices. I had to explain that we were not photographing, but were using our phone as Google Translate. He was very apologetic and we all had a good laugh. Then we went to see the North Beach at Nazare, which has recorded the biggest waves in the world between November and March. Unfortunately, today the waves were not at all spectacular. At noon we drove just 15 minutes to the Albufeira monastery, which was finished in 1178, but monks only came there in 1223. It is widely believed that 999 monks lived in the monastery at the time. We did a walking tour of the monastery and saw the refectory where the monks would have had their meals, while one monk read the holy scriptures from a raised pulpit. I went up the stairs to the pulpit, and the acoustics in the refectory were amazing. The kitchen was unbelievable, tiled from floor to ceiling, with large marble preparation tables and sinks with running water. The cloister of silence was serenity itself, with arches that were crowned with rosettes. On the upper floor we saw gargoyles up close. Gargoyles are carved stone water spouts that are designed to throw water away from the sides of buildings. We then went into the church, which is more than 100 meters in length, and saw the 14th century tombs of King Pedro and the love of his life, Dona Inés de Castro, who was assassinated. The king maintained the memory of his forbidden love by having her buried alongside himself. We walked back to our camper and had lunch, and then made our way to Óbidos, which is a beautiful walled medieval village. We parked and walked through a double elbow entrance in the wall and then up onto the top of the wall. We walked right around the top of the wall, getting magnificent views of the viaduct, the cemetery, and the village itself. The wall and tower were very high in places and narrow, with absolutely no guardrails or handrails. So it was quite exciting. Rambo was a little nervous, and I carried him at times, like when we climbed up an observation tower. But Jojo just ran without fear up and down the steps. It was a wonderful way to spend our afternoon. We walked back through the village, which had lovely little streets with hidden courtyards and lots of interesting shops and traditional tavern houses. Our walk culminated with a tasting of Obidos's famous gin ginger, a cherry-based liqueur, which the lady served to us in a chocolate tot glass. Absolutely delicious, and we would have had another if we didn't need to drive to Lisbon.
You have to eat the glass. Yeah.
Too good.
Do you know what do you have to say? I want another one.
We got to Lisbon at about 5 p.m. and checked into a secure but rather hippie-ish campsite.
Sunday, we had a little lie-in. Then, after a breakfast of yogurt and muesli, we set off at 9 a.m. for a cycle into Lisbon. Lisbon is the capital and the largest city of Portugal. We cycled 31 kilometers in about 4 hours and really enjoyed our excursion. It was a Sunday, so the traffic in Lisbon was definitely less, and we were early. But there were certainly lots of joggers and other cyclists out and about. The city is very geared up for cyclists, and we were able to cycle in dedicated cycle tracks all the way. We cycled from the campsite with the Tagus River on our left-hand side all the time. Our first stop was a square called Praça do Comércio, which is one of the biggest squares in Europe and is bordered by 79 arches. In the middle is a statue of King José. Then we headed further down to see the Ponte 25 de Abril, 25th of April bridge, which is a steel suspension bridge across the Tagus River. One lane in each direction has a surface made of metal grating, which makes a loud hum when the cars drive over it. So, the bridge is referred to as the Humming Bridge. Here we are on our cycle, and you can understand why this is called the Singing Bridge. The bridge was opened in 1966 and is 2.28 kilometers long. It is reminiscent in design and coloring to the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. A rail line, which had been part of the original design but was omitted to save money, was eventually added to the lower platform in 1999. Cycling under the bridge, we could feel the enormity of its height. Under the bridge, there were netted courts and locals were playing paddle, which is a type of tennis. On the opposite bank to the bridge is the Cristo Rei, a statue looking over the city of Lisbon. We cycled on down to the Monument of the Discoveries, which has an unpronounceable Portuguese name. The monument celebrates the Portuguese age of exploration during the 15th and 16th centuries. It is a giant ship made of white stone with 16 statues on each side, and it was really dramatic against the vibrant blue sky that we enjoyed today. The figures represent sea captains, explorers, navigators, writers, royalty, missionaries, and discoverers, including Vasco da Gama. We carried on down to the Belém Tower, which was built between 1514 and 1520 and served as a point of embarkation and disembarkation for Portuguese explorers. It was a ceremonial gateway to Lisbon. At times, this tower is surrounded by water, but unfortunately, it was low tide. We stopped and had a mid-morning coffee break at the tower and just enjoyed the view. On our cycle back to camp, we went up an incredibly steep cobbled road to Sao George Castle. It was a hectic cycle, and in the cobblestones there were tram tracks, which Dave warned me not to get my front tire in, as I could then topple over. Well, it was very stressful, to say the least. We got to the top, where we enjoyed a view over the rooftops of Lisbon, and we saw amazing little alleyways where I am always amused to see people's laundry hanging out to dry. However, we could not enter the castle, as we had our e-bikes and were not comfortable to leave them outside. Up by the Castello George, we've got our bikes, we can't go in. It was a monumentous cycle up here. And there's the Castello. There's a queue to get in, and we have bicycles. So there's the washing on the line, and more. By now it was afternoon, and there were hundreds of tourists about. The cycle down was even more scary, and I had white knuckles from braking all the way down. Sunday afternoon, we relaxed in the sunshine at our campsite, a well-deserved rest after our long cycle.
Monday, we left at 9 a.m. and drove to Sintra. On arriving, a tuk-tuk man, Sergo, helped us to park and convinced us to take a ride up the very steep hill to Pena Palace. We unfortunately decided to take the dogs, and when we reached the top and the palace, they would not allow us to enter. So our €30 ride up just resulted in us having to walk down the very steep cobble road back to the bottom. A bit of a waste of time. We did see the Pena Palace and the Moorish castle in the distance. We then drove back to Lisbon to the Cristo Rei. The statue of Christ is 30 meters tall, and he stands on an 82-meter high tower. We paid €6 each to go to the top of the tower, and it was really spectacular to look over Lisbon.
There's the bridge, and you can actually see the shadow of the Cristo Rei in front of us, and the city of Lisbon opposite. And where we stayed was right up there. We cycled all this way in yesterday to the Tower of Belém over there.
We could see where we had cycled the day before, and it gave us a wonderful perspective of the city. Christ himself was colossal. The construction of him was inspired by the Christ the Redeemer statue in Rio de Janeiro. We got to drive over the 25th of April bridge 3 times due to Google Map mishaps, but it was a wonderful sight, so we did not mind. We arrived in Evora at 2:30, and after a late lunch set about exploring. Our first stop was the Chapel of Bones, which was the work of a group of Franciscan monks who designed it as a partial solution to a problem of 42 monastic cemeteries taking up too much space in and around the expanding city. They simply moved all the remains and relocated them to the concentrated chapel, which with the Church of St. Francis. As for the bones, rather than hiding them away, they took the unusual decision of putting them out on display, cementing the remains of more than 5,000 individuals from all walks of life, all over the chapel walls and ceiling. Across the entrance it says in Portuguese, "We bones that are here await yours." So quite creepy. Church of St. Francis is next door and has a fabulous ornate interior with 12 open chapels that line the sides of the nave. Unbelievable to see all the churches that mankind has built throughout the centuries. We wandered around the cobble alleyways towards the Renaissance fountain in the Moorish square, then down around the university and up to the Roman temple. It is believed to have been erected in the 2nd or 3rd century AD, and the 14 surviving columns, topped by Corinthian capitals, stand solid over a granite base. The ancient structure has worn well, and you can't help feel a sense of awe as you pause under its mighty facade. After that, it was a stroll through Evora's central square, which is the city's bustling hub, and then back to Jack for dinner. 20,000 steps today, and we are tired and looking forward to a welcome break in Albufeira with Derek and Bev Boardman.
We arrived lunchtime on Tuesday the 24th of January to a warm welcome from Derek and Bev, and we spent 5 nights with them at Balaya Golf Estate. They have a lovely ground floor, 3-bedroom unit on the end of a row of units on the golf estate. Tuesday, we just relaxed at their home and caught up with our friends. Then, on Wednesday, we went to Maria Luisa Beach, a sandy beach popular for swimming, sunbathing, and sports like windsurfing and water skiing. The sky was a brilliant blue against the fishing boats on the shore, and we enjoyed a drink in the sunshine. Then, back home for a leisurely afternoon with lovely snacks and a cozy fire in their lounge in the evening. Thursday, they took us to Albufeira Old Town. It was a long way down, but we were pleasantly surprised to see that the municipality had provided escalators down. What a pleasure, especially on the way up. The Old Town was an elegant district of whitewashed buildings, housing shops and restaurants, plus traditional plazas with lovely cobblestone streets in mosaic patterns. We then drove to the marina for some sangria and beers. On Friday, we did a 12-kilometer hike from Felicia Beach to Villamora. We walked there along dramatic red sandstone cliffs, and we had an ice cream in Villamora and then walked back along the 6-kilometer long sandy beach with the crystal clear blue sea on our left-hand side. The dogs absolutely loved their walk, although Amigo, the Bordee's 17-year-old dog, was carried in a shoulder bag most of the way. Poor old dear. Friday night, we went to a Portuguese restaurant for dinner. A full 3-course menu for €10 per person, including a drink. Well, the drink was the choice of a large beer or half a litre of red wine per person. No decision needed. We all opted for the wine. What a deal. None of this half a glass of wine in a restaurant stuff. Saturday morning, we went to Lule, which is a town a few kilometers inland. The focal point was the Arabian-inspired covered and open-air market with stalls selling fresh produce and regional handicrafts. It was a colourful sight and a gastronomic experience as we had breakfast there. Of course, I bought some sweet pastries for us to share later. The pastel de nata is a Portuguese egg custard tart pastry, dusted with cinnamon and is really delicious. Sunday, we were set to leave for Spain with the boardies as our passengers, and we were looking forward to taking them along with us to explore Spain once again. We had had a lovely stay with the Boardmans, and it was great to catch up with old friends.
Please like and subscribe and hit the bell icon for notification of our next video.